If Yaytseslav records women without clear consent, sells or shares those recordings, or makes money from them, he can be arrested in any country where it happens, regardless of his nationality. All it takes is one woman to report that she didn't consent to being recorded or for the video to be sold. Once that happens, police can seize his devices, trace payments, and charge him for sexual exploitation, privacy violations, and cybercrime. Being a content creator or a foreigner does not protect him. In fact, it can make things worse because he can be detained, deported, banned from countries, and prosecuted locally. In a real legal environment, a Russian content creator like Yaytseslav can be arrested and dealt with not because people dislike what he does online, but because modern criminal law is structured around consent, jurisdiction, evidence, and money trails. Social media fame, foreign nationality, or the excuse of content creation does not override criminal statutes. What determines arrest is whether specific legal thresholds are crossed. And in this type of situation, those thresholds are not theoretical. They are practical, low, and easy to trigger once a single complainant steps forward. The process does not begin with outrage or public condemnation. It begins quietly with a complaint. One woman is enough. She does not need to be famous, wealthy, or supported by activists. She only needs to state that she did not consent to being recorded or that she did not consent to the distribution or sale of a recording. In criminal law, consent to sex and consent to recording are separate legal permissions. Even if a sexual act was consensual, recording it without explicit agreement is unlawful in many jurisdictions. Even if recording was agreed to, selling or sharing that recording without clear, informed permission is a separate offense. Once a complaint is made, the issue immediately shifts from online behavior to criminal procedure. Law enforcement does not require public proof at the beginning. They require a statement, basic corroboration, and the ability to preserve evidence. At that stage, police can lawfully seize devices, request platform data, and secure digital records before anything is deleted. Phones, laptops, cameras, cloud backups, and messaging apps become evidence containers. People often believe deleting content protects them, but deletion after a complaint is often interpreted as evidence tampering. Platforms retain logs, servers retain backups. Payment processors retain transaction histories. The digital footprint does not disappear simply because content is removed from view. The moment money is involved, the legal gravity increases significantly. If recordings are sold, monetized, or used to generate income through subscriptions, private links, or indirect payments, the matter escalates from a privacy violation into sexual exploitation and cybercrime. At that point, the state no longer needs to rely on the victim's persistence. The case becomes one where prosecutors act in the public interest. Profit changes how courts view intent. It introduces the concept of commercial exploitation, which carries heavier penalties and reduces sympathy for the defendant's explanations. Foreign nationality does not offer protection. In fact, it often creates additional risk. When a crime is committed within a country's borders, that country has jurisdiction regardless of the suspect's passport. Immigration status becomes leverage rather than a shield. Authorities can detain, seize travel documents, deny bail, and prosecute under local law. Diplomatic intervention does not apply to private individuals who are not state representatives. Embassies may monitor treatment, but they do not prevent arrest or prosecution. Arrests in these cases rarely happen publicly at first. There is usually no dramatic takedown. The common pattern is a summons for questioning that turns into detention or an arrest at a residence, hotel, or airport once investigators are confident evidence is preserved. Airports are particularly sensitive points because flight records, passport scans, and exit attempts signal risk of flight. Once someone is flagged as a potential offender in an ongoing investigation, attempting to leave a country can accelerate arrest rather than prevent it. If multiple complaints emerge across different countries, the case widens rapidly. Authorities begin sharing information through legal cooperation channels. This does not immediately require global warrants. It starts with data exchange, identity confirmation, and financial tracing. Payment flows reveal networks. IP addresses reveal locations. Device fingerprints reveal patterns. What looks like isolated content creation from the outside can appear from an investigative perspective as a structured operation involving recruitment, deception, recording, storage, and resale. Courts are not persuaded by claims that participants seemed comfortable or did not object at the time. Consent must be explicit, informed, and specific, especially when sexual material is involved. Silence is not consent. Smiles are not consent. Participation is not consent to recording. Recording is not consent to sale. Each step requires permission, and each missing permission creates legal exposure. When defendants argue that no one complained at first, prosecutors often respond that fear, shame, or delayed realization does not invalidate a victim's rights. Another critical factor is coercion, even subtle coercion. If a woman felt pressured because of money, accommodation, promises of travel, threats of exposure, or power imbalance, consent can be legally invalidated. Courts are increasingly sensitive to exploitation dynamics, especially involving foreigners, economic disparity, and content monetization. The law looks beyond surface-level agreement and examines context, leverage, and intent. If convicted, consequences do not end with sentencing. Assets linked to the offense can be seized. Earnings from illegal content can be confiscated. Devices can be destroyed. Online accounts can be permanently banned. Immigration consequences can include blacklisting, deportation, and long-term travel restrictions. Even after release, a criminal record tied to sexual exploitation or cybercrime follows an individual across borders and platforms. What ultimately traps individuals in these situations is not arrogance or recklessness alone, but misunderstanding how quiet and procedural the law is. The system does not debate online. It does not warn publicly. It does not argue with narratives. It waits for a complaint, secures evidence, confirms jurisdiction, and then moves when resistance is no longer useful. In short, a content creator like Yaytseslav could realistically be arrested, not because of internet opinion, but because one complainant, one device, one transaction log, and one jurisdiction are enough to trigger a process that does not stop when the camera is turned off. Once that process starts, fame does not slow it down. Money does not negotiate it away. Travel does not outrun it. The law does not chase clout. It follows files, timestamps, and consent. And when those do not align, the outcome is custody, court, and consequences. If Yaytseslav is physically in Russia right now, foreign police cannot just fly in and arrest him. Russia does not allow that. However, that does not mean he is safe. Here is the direct reality. If the alleged crimes, recording without consent, selling sexual content, exploitation, happened outside Russia, for example, in African countries, those countries can open criminal cases against him in their own courts. Once that happens, they can issue international arrest requests through Interpol. Interpol does not arrest people itself, but it alerts countries that a person is wanted. Russia rarely extradites its own citizens, especially to Western countries. So extradition is unlikely. But that does not end the case. What happens instead is this: he becomes unable to travel safely. He risks arrest the moment he leaves Russia. His name can be flagged at borders worldwide. His money, platforms, and accounts can be targeted. Partner countries can pressure Russia to prosecute him locally. If evidence is strong and publicly documented, Russian authorities can open their own case under Russian criminal law, especially if sexual exploitation, illegal content distribution, or large financial gains are involved. At that point, he can be arrested inside Russia by Russian police, not foreigners. So the bottom line is simple. Being in Russia delays consequences. It does not cancel them. He may avoid arrest today, but the moment he travels, collaborates financially, or triggers a local investigation, the risk becomes real. In short, he is not untouchable. He is just geographically paused.